everybody. Welcome back to the show, Science Dispatch Podcast. My name is Cameron English. I am your host. Great to be with you. I'm joined as always by Dr. Chuck Dinnerstein, Director of Medicine at the American Council on Science and Health. Chuck, it is terrific to see you again.
I've seen you. It's been seconds, moments.
I know. Moments. I was missing you. I was like, I need to see his beautiful bearded face again.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you.
All right, we've got an article that I wrote for the website that has caused some consternation. People got really, really emotional as a result of this article, and I'm okay with that. But I'm here to elucidate some of the details and extrapolate and other fancy verbs.
Okay.
Here to explicate.
Explicate.
That's a very sexy word. I like it. The article is called Scientific American Endorses Kamala Harris. Here's why that's a good thing. This is from last week, September 17th. And I'll just read this here, then maybe elaborate a little bit. So here's the intro. This week, Scientific American urged readers to, quote, vote for Kamala Harris to support science, health, and the environment. It's a senseless, short-sighted move that will inflame America's disdain for science. The upside is that it could incentivize needed reforms in our ideologically slanted academic and public health institutions. In case you were uncertain about my position, everybody, that's what I'm thinking. So let's start with the headline, Chuck, because I know a lot of people saw this. Not a lot. Some people saw this and went, they're endorsing a candidate? I don't like them anymore. And then some people clicked on the article and went, oh, I see where he went with this. So here's my thinking about this, Chuck. And then I'm very curious to get your position and your perspective, because I think you do have a different perspective on this, which is great. That's why we do this. So I didn't say this in the article, but one of my motivations for writing it is that everything in society has become politicized. Almost everything, So like if you turn on a show on Hulu or Netflix, there's a high probability that the show you're watching is going to be laced with current political controversies. And that's just the reality. There's plenty of examples, but the entertainment you consume is politicized in one way or the other. Video games, sports, it's such and such month, so we're all going to wear this patch on our jerseys. This kind of thing, right? You have companies coming out and saying, we advance this cause, and then their customer base goes, why the hell are you doing that? I just want to use your product, shut up. So everything has been politicized to one degree or another, and I don't think science has been spared this.
No.
And of course, by Scientific American endorsing Kamala Harris, which they did with Joe Biden in the last election, and which their parent company, Springer Nature did, or at least the journal Nature, endorsed Biden as well. And I give many other examples in the story of how coming out and being explicitly partisan is alienating a lot of people from your very valid message, right? So about the efficacy of a COVID vaccine, for example. If you come out and you tell half the country, whatever half it is, and you say, I don't like your politics, I don't like who you're probably going to vote for, and I think most of what you believe is stupid, also take this vaccine, it's great for you. Terrible message. If you have even basic understanding of human interaction and you've ever tried to have a relationship with anyone, you should understand that your opening salvo shouldn't be you're stupid and ignorant and I have more degrees than you.
It is a tough road from there to convince them.
Yes. So that's all I was getting at. Now you saw, and again, the reason I got so inflammatory with this is throughout the pandemic, I wrote a bunch of articles about vaccine mandates and different COVID policies. And I made this point over and over, and I documented it with research as best I could and say, look, when you come out and you are hateful towards people or you politicize this issue, you get the exact opposite, right? You're destroying your credibility with the public. Stop doing that. And I said that over and over again. And people don't listen. It's a problem maybe we can discuss. In the academy, people will not listen if there's enough of them that think that an idea is bad. Whether it's a good idea or whether they've really thought through it, it's just a kind of like super intellectualized herd mentality.
Groupthink.
Yes, you can call it that. I was trying to avoid the, whatever. Anyways, so the purpose of this article...
We can word share. It's okay.
Fair enough. Groupthink. groupthink for PhDs. So the point of this article, for one, was to sort of push past that and say, look, there's going to be consequences, right? You keep alienating enough people, and when they have the political influence to punish you, they're going to do it. So that's going to mean possibly reductions in the funding to agencies like NSF and NIH that fund your grants. And it's going to mean regulatory agencies that also fund your work or that you might collaborate with having less authority to do what they do, which of course we saw a couple months ago with the Chevron decision from the Supreme Court. So I was writing it to say, keep it up. Just go nuts. Tell people that women can have penises. Tell people that we should give heroin to drug addicts. Just endorse political candidates. Do anything and everything you can think of. But just be prepared when the consequences are severe, because you are eroding the public's trust. So yes, it was a Molotov cocktail. I threw it on purpose, and I was fully prepared for the sort of pushback that I got. But what did you think, Chuck?
Well, let me push a little bit then.
Okay.
I tend to see this as Scientific American getting out of its lane a little bit, and its lane has traditionally been talking about science, the verb, scientific methodology, scientific findings. Walking over to do an endorsement of any political candidate is now treating science as a noun. And that makes it very static and brings a whole range of other issues into it. So one of the questions I had was whether Scientific American felt somehow that they were no longer being taken seriously in the world, and felt that this was one of the ways they could garner more attention. And the reason I say that is because, having lived a little longer now than you, I can think back to the days of President Clinton. And at that point in time, Barbra Streisand became very politically vocal. And at about the same time she became politically vocal, the Dixie Chicks, who have now changed their name to the Chicks for other reasons, also started to become politically vocal. And you had the shut up and sing movement, that people were interested in hearing Barbra Streisand sing. They were not interested in hearing her political views. But the argument that was being made for why she was being political was because she didn't want to be taken. She wasn't being taken seriously as a human being when she was only being considered as a singer. And I'm concerned that maybe the Scientific American people had the same sense that their credibility was being questioned because they were simply being faithful reporters on what was new in science and explaining it to the lay public. And so they felt that in order to really show that they were an important power, that they should make some kind of an endorsement. So I think it was more that than anything else. And we see it when we start looking at the rise of the influencers. Scientific American, at least we know that there's somebody that has an advanced degree. When you look at social media influencers, God save us. Yeah. For some of the people that are writing and influencing what we do in terms of our health and wellness.
Always a perennial problem is, people with an audience who really shouldn't be saying things and do. And I mean, that's one of the reasons I surround myself with people like Chuck, is because I want to be sure that I'm getting facts correctly. Even if people disagree with my analysis of something, I want to make sure that I'm not saying whatever, right? So
just to make a fine point about that, that's a key to understanding why there's discord in science, because the dots are all there and the dots can be verified. It's how you put those dots together into a pattern. That's when the great mischief begins.
Sure, I think that's correct. And I don't know the motivations for Scientific American other than to say it's clearly ideological, because they're saying it's ideological, right? If you look at the article that they wrote for the endorsement, they talked about abortion, and they talked about gun control, and they talked about access to health care. in the sense of expanding public funding for healthcare. Now, whatever you think of any of those proposals, because there's arguments for and against, whatever, and that wasn't my point in resolving those issues, but those are very typical partisan arguments, right? So they didn't come out and say, Kamala Harris has a passion for space exploration, and she has this, 9-point plan to, make NASA great again or whatever, right? And she has a fascination with teaching children about basic science, right? It was nothing like that, because if they had done that, there would have been less opportunity for people like me to go, why are you doing this, right? And so that's the problem. And I think a lot of people got upset because they were saying, well, this is just one magazine, or most of their content isn't political. And I think that criticism sort of misses the point. It's sort of I don't know. It's looking through rose-colored glasses, in that you're trying to say, the system as it is working well. There's just on the periphery, there's a little bit of extremism. Maybe we can excise that and everything will be fine. But when you have Scientific American doing this, when you have a journal like Science coming out and saying, science should be political, right? We should be making statements that influence culture. And if you don't like that, well, that's because you don't share our politics, and you used to use science to promote your politics. And so now we're doing it, and this is the contemporary scientific understanding, right? So if you're going to keep doing those kinds of things, which don't happen at the higher echelons of scientific institutions unless the powerful are on board, right? Unless the people that run the show are okay with that, it doesn't happen. And so I think that's the point I'm making, is that this is a deeper problem that a lot of people in the academy just don't want to deal with, either because they're in favor of it or they just don't want the headache of getting into a fight like this.
So here's we've talked before about my friend, my current friend, Dr. Harari, and his thoughts. And here's what I think is important about it, what he says. Science is based on being fallible. Science self-corrects. It may take forever, take a while, but it self-corrects. Policy does not do that. And when it does do it, it takes even longer than it takes for the science to catch up. And I think that when Scientific American comes out and says, this is who we endorse, or Nature says something along in these lines and says, you want to be political, they're moving to the point where they're saying, we know best. We're infallible here. And if we have to go back, and this goes all the way back to the pandemic. The decision to vaccinate, to mask, the distance, all would have gone down a lot better. We're saying, we're not sure, but this is our best idea at the moment, and we're willing to change when we find something else. But it's never presented as what science is, as being fallible, as being uncertain. And I think that, people are happier with the certain lie than with an uncertain truth.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think maybe you're getting at a deeper issue, and maybe you don't agree with this, but I think society is just so massive now, right? We've scaled things up to this enormous size to where you can't help but have things be so thoroughly interconnected like this, right? So if you are in the academy, for example, you have to interact, and we sort of talked about this on the last episode, right? You have to interact with institutions like the NSF or the NIH, because that's where your livelihood comes from, And if you are a magazine like Scientific American, what's a way that you attract readers and make yourself relevant, as you were sort of saying, right? You just, turn the volume up on the stereo as loud as you can and go, yep, we're sure doing it, right? So in other words, it sounds to me like the incentives in a lot of ways are deeply distorted. And so people have a reason to do things that are probably not in the best interest of themselves long term, and then in society long term, because right now yeah. There's money to be made now. There's clout to earn now if I do this. And I think that's the issue.
And there's all that virtual signaling along the way. And interesting, now here's the one I found fascinating this week is California was very much embraced Tesla when the cars came out, because having a Tesla was a virtue signal that you were ecologically conscious. But as Elon has gotten to be more and more the spokesman for the right, they are selling those cars in droves because they're no longer virtue signaling the signal they want to give. So selling the cars is the new virtue signal. And I think that that's a lot of what Scientific American is doing here. They seem to feel that they need to take a stand at the moment. I think that it's not in their best interest. I would be much happier if they would just teach everybody about science. And they could have done the same thing here politically. If they could have laid out the Republican and the Democratic plan for science, that would have been a step in the right direction, because it's not discussed and nobody's going to read the platforms. You have to shoot yourself if you want to read the platforms. So that would have been another step in the right direction. The other group that I saw that was just interesting is that a lot of the hedge funds have set up separate philanthropies and are giving to their causes too. So there's a lot of money washing around and influence being bought by any number of groups, either by their endorsements or by funneling money to this project or that project that we're just not aware of. I just find very off-putting.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And one of the things that I think would be helpful is if you had institutions come out and say, we have a political perspective, we're not going to hide that from you. Nevertheless, here's the information as best as we understand it. And the reason I say that is I had a teacher at one point in my life who was infamous on campus for being a progressive. He just had that reputation. And so some people before taking his class were like, oh, do I have to be prepared for this guy to lecture me about, whatever he's invested in? And then when I showed up to his class the first day, and he comes in and he goes, I know you've all heard all sorts of things about me. And he says, I'm a political strategist for the Democratic Party, and I have very strong politics, but I'm not here to make you a Democrat, right? I'm here to make you understand how our system works, how it doesn't work, and how you can possibly fix it. And you could just feel the tension in the room dissipate, because he just said, here's my cards, they're on the table. You're welcome to question me. You're welcome to challenge my arguments. This is what our political process is all about. And that flipped everything on its head. So if people in science would do that, that'd be great. And I think it would actually help them communicate better. But what happens instead is whatever the reigning paradigm is, that becomes the objective middle ground, right? And then everyone who doesn't agree with that is outside, and they're the ones who are not following the data or whatever cliche you want to use. And I don't know, a little more openness, a little more transparency, I think would go a long way.
Well, we can substitute the word humble in the face of what we do not know. Which I'll just to irk you, I will take back and say that's what Harari was talking when he talked about fallibility. That the real scientist knows that whatever that they've worked on can be overturned. They think it's the best understanding we have today. It is not going to be the understanding that we have tomorrow.
Well said. Maybe we'll get to a point, Chuck, where that becomes the standard again. When we talk about science communication and, spreading science literacy, that's not the message that's communicated to people. And I wish it were. I would like to get back there. I just don't, and that was why I concluded the article the way I did. I don't think it's going to happen until people start to feel some pain for things that they say that are absurd, right?
Yes.
Until, right? Sometimes you have to touch the stove and burn your hand before you go, I better not do that anymore. So,
okay.
Anyways, like I said, Chuck's a little more of a middle of the road. Let's work it out, right? I don't know. That's my perception.
I'm going to go with you. I'm more of a Zen middle way kind of guy.
Yeah.
Not so much the middle of the road, but
right.
Let's see if we can bring the pieces together.
Little Phil Jackson-y. I dig it. Okay. And that's our differences, right? That's salt and pepper or whatever, yin and yang. I don't know. Anyways, well, thank you as always. I appreciate Chuck being a conversation partner, a sounding board for my ideas. And I thank you all for listening to the show and for reading the article. Even if you don't like me and you think I'm crazy and I'm a grifter. And someone said I've been captured by our radical audience, right? I'm just sort of catering to the right-wing misinfo addicts in our comment section.
See? And I've been called Dr. Libtard, so I think we've really covered the range.
I love that. I think you should just own it.
Well, I do, because my children will use it
that's right.
in conversation.
Yeah, okay, Dr. Libtard. As we wrap up here, I do love that. And the first person to point this out to me about ACSH was my predecessor, Dr. Alex Barazow, who, when I first met him, used to say, if I write a pro-vaccine article, people call me a big pharma shill. If I write an article criticizing someone in the academy, I'm a right-wing hacktivist. You just can't win. So, yeah. There's very little plaudits, I guess, to be won by saying things you really think sometimes, everybody. So just beware of that. Anyways, we'll wrap it up there. Once again, the article is called Scientific American Endorses Kamala Harris. Here's why that's a good thing. It's at acsh.org. Check it out. Go to the subscribe tab and punch in your email address. We will send you all the articles that we publish. And when you come to the show, you'll know what we're talking about. Thank you as always, and we'll see you next time.